On today's show, the offseason is underway, and I'm joined by Tyler Jones for part one of a two-part conversation, and all of that is coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1699 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday into Monday. And today's show is brought by the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Also, I should encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day. Please check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. That includes Spotify and Apple and YouTube, and again, anywhere else you might find podcasts. I did a show on Friday evening, deep into the night into Saturday, talking about the exit interview process for the Hawks on Friday, as well as the final resolution for the Sacramento Kings pick this year. Catch up on that right now, as well as my full breakdown of the final game of the season in the play-in for Atlanta. But it's been a busy time and plenty more to come because it's now offseason mode, of course, for the Hawks. And that kind of speaks to what we're going to be doing today on the show. It's actually going to be part one of two. My friend Tyler Jones is back on the podcast, always my most requested guest. Front of the podcast to talk about all things offseason for the Hawks. And without any further delay, here we go with part one right now. I am joined now by friend of the podcast, Tyler Jones. Tyler, it's been a while. The season's over, and here we are talking again. I appreciate you coming back.
I just got one question for you, Brad.
I'm sure it's not about the Hawks.
How you feel about a wide receiver at 8?
I would not enjoy that. I would not enjoy a wide receiver.
Why not? Why not? It's the best wide receiver draft in since the Julio draft? Like why wouldn't you want another wide receiver? I'm confused, Brad.
I would understand it because of what you just said. If everybody wants to know, we're talking about the Falcons briefly at the top of the podcast.
What else will we talk about on the Locked On Hawks podcast?
Right. I do understand because if they just go best player available, it might be a receiver. That would be understandable on some level, and they really only have one receiver. I mean, they did invest there, but not really. They kind of brought in some guys. So,
Brad, I cannot wait for them to take a wide receiver. You and me both know it's in their blood. They can't help it. I mean, there's no way they're taking a defensive prospect, especially not if that prospect's not a no doubter defensive
and there isn't one.
And so they're going to take a wide receiver, baby. Come on, let's go.
All right.
MVP season.
Oh, here we go. All right, let's get now that that's out of the way. We're recording this over the weekend. It's not going to go up till Monday, I don't think. So keep that in mind. If anything changes, nothing's going to change. Everyone at exit interviews was like, we're getting away for a few days. So I can't imagine there's going to be breaking news. I guess we'll start there. Look, the season came to an end. You've been on ATL on 29 a lot recently, which is good. People get to hear your thoughts there. They should listen to that podcast, but you haven't been here in a while. On one hand, the end of the season was not particularly surprising given the roster they had available. We could talk about that. But what did you make of the way it ended from, I guess, the last few games of the regular season? They kind of punted, which made sense to me, but not everybody liked that. And then the plan did not go according to what they wanted it to go, but it was also kind of foreseeable on some level.
It's hard to say. It's hard to even be disappointed. I was hopeful. There were a couple earlier, maybe a month ago or maybe 3 weeks ago on ATL on 29. I talked about how I was hopeful for the season because of what Vit Krejci was bringing to the table. Then get Trey back, but then Jalen got hurt again.
Yep.
And the last ankle tweak he had, it was really off of nothing, and after that happened, I'm like, he's probably done for the season. And if Jalen's not on this team, I'm not sure they have the upside to really do anything in the playoffs against the Celtics. So
in some ways, that really did end the season. I mean, we didn't necessarily know that day, but as soon as they announced the timeline of the reevaluation, and I was like, guys, that's the season unless they beat the Celtics, and they weren't going to beat the Celtics without Jalen. So it's
and my optimism came from, I was like, maybe a Kongu can be coming back during this last stretch, along with Trey, who we knew was going to be coming back, regardless of how he was going to be able to play. I thought if they can get their guys back, because I mean, the frustrating thing about the season is that they figured it out. They figured out how Quinn wanted them to play on both ends of the floor to end the season, but they didn't have the guys. Like, they just didn't have the roster to really compete. Like, so that's like a catch-22 on the year. But if you look at the season from a totality, even if they were fully healthy, they're still not title contenders.
Oh,
right.
Definitely not.
So it's like we're like, okay, maybe they could have been what the Magic were this year. But I don't like. I think they know this isn't good enough. Their defense, just because of the roster and the personnel that they have, it's just never going to be good enough. And then offensively, the trade DeJounte pairing, you're just not getting any boons from those two sharing the court together. Like, there's no real, like, they don't really add to each other's game. It's something I looked up to end the season. I was just looking like at the Hawks, and you see a couple things. One is that like only 3 of their 8 guys played more than 70 games this season. Five of the Hawks came into the season as a thin team with 8 rotation players, and Jalen was the 8th guy. And so, but like during the season, like Jalen, Hunter, Trey, Sadiq Bey, and Onyeka Okongwu, none of them played 60 games. All of them played, like, except for Sadiq. Sadiq played the most out of that quintet of guys. And so the good things that happen is that they've eventually developed depth, but at the expense of losing a lot of games. Like, it took a bad season of them, like, losing games they made it should have won, for guys like Garrison Matthews to really become the basketball player that can help a team win games in the regular season. Instead of just being like a shooter, he really became a more dynamic player on both ends of the floor.
Yeah.
So that was a fine. Vik Krejci, we may get into.
We'll come back to him.
That's a real find. And even stuff like Jalen's advancement as a player, that might not have happened if the injuries didn't happen. So there are some positives with the injuries, but overall, like, the talent on the team, because of due to the injuries, really like capped what they could potentially do in the playoffs. So I'm not too disappointed. I like you go out there with Trey, DeJounte, Bogey, like, who you're not, especially against the Bulls, who only start guards too. Like, they just didn't have the personnel defensively, and so I'm not too upset about it. And then you saw the form Trey was in. It's like, we'll get after it next season, but they're going to have to make some changes. That is something that's abundantly clear. That was clear throughout the season.
Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go, and I've been told about that I'm a competitive person. I definitely admit that. It's definitely the case, and I have a competitive side for sure. We all do on some level, I think, and my competitive side is also a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it at some point because it has been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great Swiss Monopoly. We actually not play just one time, but actually hundreds of game boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part, honestly, is being able to mess with all of your friends. You can charge them rent on your iconic properties, just like in the classic Monopoly game, and you also rob their vaults of riches for yourself. And the leaderboards also show you who actually has to be the biggest Monopoly tycoon at that point in time. It's not just my competitive side that loves it as well. Team up with your friends if you want to have that experience. People also all over the world can be on your team in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game right now and join your friends in doing so by downloading Monopoly Go. Yes, you can download Monopoly Go right now for free on the App Store or Google Play Store. One more time, download the Monopoly Go app right now today. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets easier and faster for you. They have killer last-minute deals. They have all-in prices. They have views from your seats and the lowest possible price guarantee, and that makes Game Time a fantastic option to make things easy for you in buying tickets. I've been a user regularly on the apps for quite some time now. It's coming in handy for me for looking at tickets for the Braves and the Falcons, Atlanta United, etc. And at Game Time, you actually save 6% off when buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have flash deals where you can save big time and also save even more when you choose a section and Game Time actually choose the seats for you in that section. There's also an awesome feature that actually allows you to toggle to show the total up front with no surprise fees when you get to that checkout at the very end. Get a panoramic view from your seat, I should say, in the app before you buy, and you are also getting the lowest price of guaranteed at Game Time, or they'll credit you 110% of the difference of that price. Your purchase is actually covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the industry as well. That includes event cancellation protection and on-time ticket delivery. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with the folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app right now. Create an account. Use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Use that promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. For sure, we agree. I think the changes, the run it back option of last year, and I guess I know they didn't technically run it back because they traded Collins, they effectively just ran it back, and then also doubled down on that by not making a single transaction at the trade deadline, which I think was also maybe indicative of the injuries too. Like they kind of knew they weren't going to be one piece away. Maybe it was what I would take away from that. It's kind of all, they would never say this. To be very clear, they had never said this and would never say this. It felt like they knew pretty close to the middle of the season that they were not going to do anything this year, and they kind of acted accordingly. Even the Veet thing, which we can talk about, like, it's both things were true. It's like, okay, they obviously did not maximize their win probability in the play-in by not converting Veet. I don't think they would have won if Veet played, just to be very clear, but he would have played, and given what they could not do, he would have helped them. I think
it would have been a competitive game. I think full stop. Like, I don't think Kobe White's just getting free passes in front of the rim if Veet Krejci's starting him. That sounds ridiculous. That would sound ridiculous 2 months ago. But the last game of the season, I saw Veet Krejci defend Tyrese Halliburton 94 feet and absolutely stonewall him 2 possessions in a row. And I'm like, this guy is a good defender.
Well, and he's also long. He's also long, and
he's big. He's tall, athletic.
It's funny because they had
all the traits you need.
They had DeJounte on Kobe White, and it was funny because like you could tell who watched the game and who didn't, because there was an online talk about like, oh my God, Trae Young allowed 40 points to Kobe White, and it's like DeJounte guarded Kobe White as the primary in the game, but it didn't matter who was guarding. To be fair, they didn't have anybody to guard him. Not to do the whole V thing again, but like
it was also a lot of bogey. Just like,
of course,
I don't know what.
I'm glad you said it earlier. Like the fact that they were playing Trae, DeJounte, and Bogey together.
I love Bogey. I don't know what he was doing as a backline defender. Like it was just. I'm like, what? He was like setting up for charges. He was set up for charges when the guard wasn't like coming downhill full speed, and I'm like, what are you doing?
It was a hot mess, and we don't have to relitigate that. But like going back to what you said, they knew deep down. Landry, it doesn't really say much, but he did say to the question I asked him that they still believe they made the right decision with Veet, and that kind of tells you like a little bit anyway. I think that they were pretty reticent and pretty understanding that they were going to like probably not do anything, and if on the margins,
do it, and it's one of those things where. This is something we talked about on the other pod, 18 on 29. Check us out. We talked about, it was like, is Trent Forrest, could they have cut Trent and then signed Veet and have him playing the play? Sure.
That's what I would have done. But
why potentially burn a bridge there, even though Trent probably won't be in demand? He was a useful player for you this season. He did help out in a lot of games. Why like burn some goodwill here?
And they do value that too. That was a Travis Schlenk thing too. He's not there anymore, but they do value those relationship things. Like the Hawks don't like to do the cutthroat stuff. Now you could argue maybe they should do more of that, but even when they had to
they're going to have to do that this offseason, but I can understand not doing it for this year. Like
it could be a flaw, but even this back, so people have forgotten this now, because like when they had to make a decision on Trent Forrest, when I was going crazy about how they were having an ineligible player for 2 weeks of the season, which never, ever, ever happens. It was insane. When they finally did that, they waited so long to cut Patty. But they also did it on the day that Patty would have been still eligible to sign with another team. Like they kept Patty as long as they could. They finally made the decision. They talked Patty up on the way out the door. Like even that they handled with the most kid gloves imaginable with a guy that they knew they were going to cut Patty for longer than they actually did. Like they chose Trent over Patty, which I understood. Anyway, it's just one of those things. They don't like to rock the boat. But for me, again, it kind of tells you like they didn't believe that this is going to be a run. Now, when I say they, I mean the organization. Quinn is still coaching every game like they're trying to win the finals. Like Clint played his season high in minutes in the play-in loss in a game where they were down by 20 in the fourth quarter the entire way, and Clint played the whole fourth quarter. The game was over. It was over. Like DeJounte played 46 minutes in a game that was over with 10 minutes to go.
It might be those two's last games in Atlanta.
It might be.
I can understand Quinn just being like,
"No, I'm just
last game of the year, whatever."
I'm not criticizing. I'm just on this one. I have before, of course. I'm just saying, like, Quinn is still trying to win every game. So I'm not saying it's that or the players. They're obviously trying to win. I mean, organizationally,
the organization when the team was like when they clearly needed some help this season at the deadline or even before the deadline, the Hawks were like, we're not doing that for a team that's capping out as the AC.
Exactly. Even when they,
not wasting our time.
Dylan Windler is a useful body, but like they also when they finally had to make a transaction to bring somebody in, and they converted Trent. They had a two-way slot instead of actually bringing in someone with actual size. Even if they couldn't play, just someone with some physicality.
Center. Like
they signed Dylan Windler, who like Dylan Windler did a fine job in his tiny minutes, but like that didn't make any sense in real life. Anyway, they didn't prioritize this year by the end of the season, which leads us to like what they do now, right? Because no one's going to come out and say we're making big changes, but the tone of it was certainly like we're going to evaluate. But I think they all know that there's going to be some more significant changes coming. Do you want to start with Trey and DeJounte? We can start there. That's like that's the big talking point. And by the way, I have a stat that I want to share, which is maybe why I want to start there.
Go ahead.
So the Hawks have, I didn't even count the number. I think it was like 30-something lineups this year with two players. They played at least 500 minutes, right? Two-player lineups, 500 minutes or more. The worst net rating of a two-player lineup the Hawks had to play 500 minutes or more this year was Trey and DeJounte. That is insane. I can't express to you how wild that is to have your two best players produce the worst lineup net rating of all of your guys. And that kind of tells you, and look, it's a one-season sample size. They only played, I'm looking at it now, it was like, it was about 1,200-ish minutes together. That's a lot of minutes for the season.
That's a lot of minutes.
But, and last year it wasn't as bad as that. So last year, so it's a two-season sample size. Last year, they were more okay when they played together, but they also weren't, to your point earlier, they weren't a positive. They weren't driving success together at all.
Yeah, and last year they had John Collins playing a lot of minutes with the starters, and so then you had good defensive foundation.
Right, and the starters worked and all that stuff.
This season, you didn't have John Collins, and you saw.
And by the way, to your point, like the number one reason why that two-man lineup had as bad of the numbers that it had was the defense. The offense wasn't incredible either, but they had, I'm looking at it now just to make sure I'm not wrong. Yeah, they had a 121.3 defensive rating with Trey and DeJounte on the court.
I'm surprised lineups with Trey, DeJounte, let's say Sadiq Bey, DeAndre Hunter didn't get any stops.
And for a lot of the season, Jalen was out for a while. They ended up having to start Sadiq together with all that stuff. There's noise in there. There always is. It's two-man lineups are not perfect. Both Quinn and Landry leaned on that when they were asked about Trey and DeJounte in the effort to kind of not say anything. They basically said, it goes beyond those two. Of course it does. Of course it does. But it does tell you that, A, defensively, those guys are small. While Trey has improved, starting two small guards together is bad defensively. It's just going to always be bad defensively.
Honestly, it's not even necessarily that they're small, because I think lineups with Trey and Garrison Matthews worked. Like lineups with or Trey, if the small guard Trey's playing alongside is a point of attack defender, I bet you those lineups will work. You know what I'm saying?
They'd be better, and
it's less. To me, it's less of they're too small, more of neither of them can guard other team's primary option.
And we don't need to do the whole thing again, but this is the ultimate indictment.
Guards. Like on defense. And then offensively, the reality is DeJounte's not a high volume 3-point shooter, even though he got a lot better this season.
A lot better.
You look at his shot diet, only 38% of his shots are threes, which I'm pretty sure is probably the highest mark of his career.
It is.
But like you compare that to every other perimeter player on the team, like the lowest is DeAndre Hunter at 46. Trey's at 47. Bogey's at 58. Bay's at 50% of his shots are three-pointers. Garrison Matthews at 80% of his shots are three-pointers. Dylan Windler, when he played, all his shots were threes.
Yeah, they're like 100%.
The only guy who doesn't shoot that many threes is Jalen Johnson, because you want Jalen, around or the
That's
center.
not his game. Yeah, exactly.
And so but that's the primary issue. It's like the way you win basketball games in today's NBA is by shooting a lot of three-pointers and making a lot of them, or getting shots at the rim and getting to the free throw line. And that's not in DeJounte's game. His game is predicated on the mid-range pull-up isolation, which doesn't necessarily need another lead ball handler like Trae Young to maximize DeJounte Murray. Like they don't add to each other. And then DeJounte on that end, as an ISO scorer, he's an okay passer. He's not an elite driver of offense.
Playing the two, he's a good passer as a two. He's an average point guard passer, I would say. And that's only magnified. And it's sometimes ungenerous because Trae is obviously elite as a passer. So it almost feels like DeJounte is worse than he actually is. He's not a bad passer. He's fine. And we talk about this a lot, but it really does just kind of speak to the theory just did not work on either end of the floor. The theory they had when they traded for DeJounte 2 years ago was he was going to take the heat off Trae offensively, all those stuff, also be a backup guard, which has worked better this year because DeJounte did a really good job when he's on the ball. He's more comfortable on the ball, all those things. But then importantly, the defensive side of the floor, they thought DeJounte was going to change their lives defensively, and that obviously did not happen. So we don't have to talk about like why it didn't work, but are we in agreement at this point that I'm not saying they're going to, and I've done interviews the last couple of days, like radio stuff, podcasts. Everybody always asks me, like, are they going to break it up? And I always say probably, not definitely. Because I haven't gotten to definitely yet. I probably won't get to definitely until it actually happens. I do think, based on what I have heard, what's been messaged, what is out there in the ether in the league beyond the Hawks, it feels like they do know, I think, that they kind of have to do it now, one way or the other. And I think, of course, DeJounte is more likely to move than Trae. But even then, I said this recently too, like, this is the first time I've ever thought it was even possible they might trade Trae. I would not trade Trae, to be fair, but at least I think it's like non-zero that they do that. But big picture, I think it's probable they're going to break it up. Does that sound reasonable to you as someone who is just watching the team? Not like you're not digging in for intel, but like it feels like that's a logical conclusion at this point. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. You win up to 100 times the money on your Prize Picks entries with just as little as 4 correct picks. That's right. For example, turn $10 into $1,000 with an entry today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And they have something for every single sports fan in your life. That means basketball and hockey and League of Legends, everything in between. And Prize Picks is also the best way to get on the action in more than 30 states across the country. That includes Georgia, of course, in addition to California and Texas. If you want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players, you also find them in the community plays under the promo tabs of the app when it comes to viewing entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each and every week. They have injury insurance. Your entries actually stay in play even if one of your players happens to be injured. That's very helpful. It's also really simple to play at Prize Picks. Make your picks and submit an entry in just 60 seconds or less. It's that quick, that easy. That's huge for me. And just because I don't have that much time, and one of the biggest reasons why I have really enjoyed playing there over the last few years. They have quick withdrawals. They have easy gameplay, an enormous selection of stat types and players that you can't find anywhere else. That helps you make the Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for first-time deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app. It's Prize Picks and use code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting about the Trae thing. I don't see any scenario where they would.
I don't think it's. But to be very clear, I think it's a remote possibility. And I've always said to this point, I could only see them trading Trae if Trae wanted to be traded. If Clutch/Trae went to them and said, "Please get me out of here," they would do it. I think I've always thought that. I'm not saying that's going to happen. This is the first time I don't think it's a 0% chance. Does that make sense?
I'll say this: if they're trading Trae, then they're going full rebuild because
and the problem there,
just full stop. A DeJounte led Hawks team isn't you're capped out as like the 6th seed. Like you're just not.
What? What I would say to that.
That's not. I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but it's like.
I think you're right.
It's like offensively, even though he's gotten a lot better, and I think he's actually going to continue to get better as a basketball player. Like he's clearly getting better. He's on a positive trajectory where I could totally see him being potentially being like a 2 to 3 time legitimate all-star.
Yeah.
But like he's not getting 3-pointers or getting to the rim and getting to the free throw line.
I think
like,
we saw it a
I'm
little
not
bit
sure
when Trey was out.
In today's NBA,
it's
that.
Yeah, it's not a huge sample, but we saw a little bit when Trey was out. Like they were able to stay afloat, which is a huge credit to DeJounte. Huge credit to him. But the way they did it was they were taking advantage of the March NBA landscape where you're playing against teams that don't have their guys, and they still weren't scoring. They were a bottom 10 offense. Even when they were kind of grinding out wins, they weren't scoring. So it comes down to, and we don't have to talk about this a lot, but I talked about this actually with someone, I won't say their name, at Exeter Interviews yesterday. And it was, we were laughing because we had the same discussion about like, what do you look like if DeJounte is your best player? And I had the same thought as you. Like, you can't be that good if DeJounte is your best player. The way that would work would be that Jalen becomes your best player. That's the only way that actually works.
Yeah, but even then, like,
no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you do that.
Like Jalen and DeJounte, like
they don't work.
No
together.
Synergy between.
I agree.
Between those two. Whereas Jalen, I can see Jalen. Well, the only synergy I can see, I will, to DeJounte's credit, just how much better he's gotten as a catch and shoot player. Like,
yeah, he has.
If DeJounte's willing to sprint to the corners, like Joe Johnson of old, while Jalen's running fast break to get open 3-pointers, that can work if the defense is good. But like in the half court, no, that's not.
We might need to do a whole show about this, and we're not going to do it now. I think that the overall takeaway of if you willingly, and when I say willingly, I mean he doesn't ask you for it. If you proactively choose to trade Trae Young, I agree. It needs to be as part of a like full scale overhaul. I don't think that it's viable. And I know, look, a lot of fans disagree. I've seen a lot of people online that want this to happen. And I'm not picking on those people necessarily. It's just that I don't think it's a good idea. And I don't know where you're going. At least with Trae. And look, the counterpoint is always look at what the Hawks have been the last 3 years. And that's a fair retort. I'm not saying it's not. But I think that you have a lot more upside as a franchise with Trae than you do without Trae, especially if your plan is to keep trying to win post-Trae trade. Because if you trade him, it's going to be for a pick-laden package. It's not going to be for like a star coming back. Those deals don't really happen that way. So you're going to get worse. And yeah, you might get some of your draft capital back, but you're now building without the guy that you always wanted. It's so ironic to me. I'm sure you had the same thought too. But all we heard for years, even when they were good, even in the Joe era, even in the Paul era, there was always a huge segment of the fan base is like, wake me up when you get a star player. Like Joe Johnson, I thought was an actual star player, I will say, but he wasn't treated that way locally.
And he wasn't a star player.
Star is, I think Joe was a top 20 player, top 25 player. Like he was a good player. He was a multi-time all-star, all those things. But
you need to go up more. He was like top 30, maybe. He wasn't the best player on the team.
And that's fine. And that's what I'm saying. Like there was always this like, give me a star. And
but like,
they got one.
To my point with DeJounte, he's kind of like Joe Johnson in the sense
I think he's a worse version of Joe Johnson. But yes.
ISO heavy, no free throws, no real rim attempts.
And in the modern league, that's actually worse because when Joe was playing, that was still pre-analytical revolution where like a lot of teams were still playing that way. But even then, my point was like, I think everybody deep down knew that you weren't going anywhere with Joe Johnson, but they were at least winning 48 games a year. Like they were good. But
they were winning, Brad, because they built their foundation.
And that's what I'm saying.
And they didn't rush the rebuild. If the Hawks hadn't rushed the rebuild.
And they did.
This season is the consequences of rushing your rebuild.
100%.
They 100% where they went like, okay, we got John, we got Kevin. All right, we got a good enough core. Let's go for it.
Well, you're right.
So they went for it, and they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They might have won the NBA Finals that year if Trey didn't get hurt. So
you're higher on that than I am, but I understand. Yes,
but Gallo declined. We don't know what's going on with Capella. You drafted a center, like the last lottery pick before this one is you drafting a starter caliber center while you already had
and having him finish his rookie contract without starting.
His rookie contract without starting because you couldn't find any deal for Clint Capella to make your team better. Like that's if there was a deal out there to trade Capella for a Herb Jones, they would have done it. Nobody's trading Capella for a Herb Jones. Nobody. Because no team is trading their version of a point of attack defender who makes their 3-pointers for a center that cannot shoot. Period. That is the NBA. Doesn't matter how good you think Capella is. Doesn't matter how good you think Capella is. His lack of versatility limits what you can do on the floor on both ends. It just does. So it's one of those things where it's like Okongwu is the worst player, but he has more trade value. Are you going to trade Onyeka Okongwu, the younger player on the cheaper contract, to maintain what we have here with Clint Capella? Like
the answer to that has been no.
It's been 3 years of this with Clint, Trey, Core, Bogey. Like you look at it, like they only win. Like this team only goes on runs when they're winning games. When Clint and Bogey are on it.
That's right.
Like and so we're but we got to break. They got to find a way to break away from it.
I agree. No,
you traded 3 first-round picks for DeJounte Murray to break away from it, only for DeJounte Murray to functionally just be Kevin Huerter. Like he's just Kevin Huerter, but more usage. Like there's
it did not fun. And look, we could stop relitigating that deal. Like I think. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure someone's going to tell us that it's a good deal still. No one thinks that was a good trade. No one. It didn't work. The idea of it didn't work. They overpaid. And and again, we both said DeJounte has played well. He had his best. I would argue he had his best season individually of his career this year, even though he didn't have he had more counting stats with the Spurs his last season in the Spurs because he was just doing everything for them.
He's a much better player.
He's a better player now than he was then. It's not his fault. He's improved. His defense is not very good. But that is more of a evaluation failure on the Hawks side than it is actually.
It was a evaluation failure on them overvaluing how good the Hawks were, that they thought they were a DeJounte Murray away from contending. Right. When in reality, they just have too many. Like we fundamentally as an organization, I feel like the second it became clear that Jalen Johnson was by far the team's best the team's best forward, period.
Yeah.
Like, out of nowhere. Like where the plan was not for Jalen Johnson to be this, to potentially, if he would have
not this year,
win most improved. He might win most improved next year, honestly. Considering
Tyler, he didn't start the opener.
They were like, yes, DeJounte trade like that. He
didn't start the opener. Is all you need to know about that. So like they obviously like Jalen. They drafted him. Like everyone likes Jalen. But as far as this season's breakout is concerned, he didn't start the opener. That's all you need to know about what they thought it was going to happen this year. Like they obviously like him.
He went from not starting to Quinn was early in the season playing him 38 minutes a night.
Yeah, because they all know the deal now.
We can't do anything if Jalen's not on the floor.
Yeah, they all know the deal now. There's the most indispensable. Honestly, you could have argued this year at times he might have been their most indispensable player, and that includes Trey. I mean, only because they have DeJounte. So like, if you took Trey, Trey's their best player. I still believe that full-throated. It's not even close in my opinion. But at least if you took Trey off, if you had DeJounte, you were okay on that area. And Jalen, you just couldn't. There was no replacement for Jalen. And now this is something we talked about a lot, and we want to do it again 6 months ago.
Until of course Veet came. Until Veet showed up on the scene.
Veet is helpful for sure. He's not going to replicate Jalen.
And changed my life when I'm like, I don't have to pretend about DeAndre Hunter and Sadiq.
Oh Lord.
This is what I want for my wing, man.
Had a good year.
Shoot 3-pointers drive to the rim, kick it out for passes. Like, that's all I needed, man. I don't need all this. Whatever them fools doing, man. Like, they not good. No, but seriously, like, until V showed up on the scene, if Jalen wasn't playing and it was just DeAndre and Sadiq, it didn't look good on either end of the floor because they're just not athletes. Like, they're not good enough athletes at the forward position in today's NBA, and they're not good enough shooters. Even though DeAndre is a good shooter, like, to me, I do think there's some stuff that became clear as the season went along. One was DeAndre is a power forward. He's really a one position player. I think the days of just starting him at small forward, I'm not sure that's a viable option anymore. Like, his best stretch of basketball came when he was coming off the bench, playing 20, 25 minutes a night. Once they started extending his minutes again, like, the explosion from him offensively wasn't there anymore. So that's something they're going to have to look into. I liked overall what Sadiq did, but he's probably not somebody you want starting. So, like, coming into next season, they have to find a starter caliber wing.
That's what I was going to ask you next. So, yeah.
Because, like, I don't want Trey and Bogey starting because, I mean, it's just Trey and DeJounte defensively. Like, Trey and Bogey defensively is not going to work. You don't want to play those two. You don't want to start the game playing those two. You want to end the game playing with those two on the floor together. But starting the game, you might want to have somebody maybe like potentially a Kobe Buffin or somebody. You might have to find somebody to play that role at the two.
All right, that's all for part one with myself and Tyler. We will have part two available in your podcast feed of choice right now. So stay tuned for that. Click on over to that podcast, and it should be a lot of fun. Please subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Please follow us on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. Subscribe, rate, review, all of that fun stuff. Share with a friend, and we'll see you all next time.